Timber Talks is brought to you by Wood Solutions. Stay up to date with the latest in timber, the building material that is strong, safe and sustainable. Here is your host, Adam Jones.
Collectively, we all had a year like no other in 2020, and the challenges we faced were unprecedented. But with them came new trends and, of course, new opportunities. And after predictions of Armageddon, the residential construction sector is unexpectedly going through a big boom currently. And today we're speaking with Adrian Hondros, the CEO of Porter Davis, in order to try and make sense of it all. So what you're going to hear from Adrian is making sense of 2020 and what it means for our future. Also, the future of sustainability, digital and prefabrication in residential construction, and advice for professionals on how to be relevant for a changing future in the workforce. Now, it's a real privilege and honour to get to speak to Adrian. He holds wonderful insights with an interesting background in construction, so I know you're going to really enjoy this interview. So without any further ado, here is my conversation with Adrian Hondros. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Adrian. Really appreciate it, and it's great to meet you. I'd love to start this discussion with a little bit about your background and how you ended up coming into the property industry.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. So originally from Perth, born and raised, and came to Melbourne at the age of 27 with my new bride, Emma, at the time. We're still married, so it's been quite a journey in that respect. And 3 of our 4 children were born here, and came for financial services opportunities. I worked with IWF here in Melbourne. I had opportunities to work with NAB, both here and then the Commonwealth Bank in Sydney. Worked for HBOS, which is a UK-based bank during the GFC, and it got bought out by the Commonwealth Bank, which is how I ended up there in 2008, and then made a bit of a transition from Commonwealth Bank to Porter Davis, and the trigger for that was a bit of professional development that I did. The Chief Executive of CBA at the time, Ian Narev, he recognised that I was probably due to do some sort of self-exploration and have a bit more of a professional development journey. So I had the opportunity to go to France, sponsored by CBA, which I'm still very grateful for. I was very generous of them.
Absolutely.
And went to Fontainebleau, which is south of Paris, which, by the way, is where Napoleon had his summer palace. And INSEAD is the university there, which is a well-regarded university globally. And I had 30 days on campus with 60 people from around the globe and the academic staff of INSEAD, and came out of that experience where they pull you apart and put you back together again, and came out with the realisation, in fact, came out with the affirmation that it was time to do something else. So that may not have been necessarily the CBA's plan, or maybe it was. But I came back to Australia after some travel with family in early 2016, and had left CBA by June of that year. And then just through a process of recruitment firms and discussions, I was looking for the next gig, and Porter Davis was looking for their new CEO, and it just happened to come together that way. So a bit of a journey.
Absolutely. And do you see I've got a very good friend of mine who thinks that people with a strong background in finance make for the best CEOs in property. But
very generous of him.
Very generous. But do you think that strong background in finance is really helpful as the CEO right now of Porter Davis?
I think it's probably helpful for almost any CEO in any industry. Yeah, look, I think if you've got a good, strong finance background, then you're across the numbers, and when all's said and done, the people are critical, but so are the numbers, and strategy is critical, but so are the numbers, and it'll be the numbers that will bring you down if you don't get them right. So it definitely helps to have a strong finance background, and whether it was Porter Davis residential building or some other industry or company, it's probably an advantage for everyone, I think. Yeah.
So we're coming out of 2020, which is obviously one of the most interesting years collectively that we've ever had. It's still early 21, so take us through what happened in the journey you had within Porter Davis.
Yeah, look, thank you. It's I think for everyone, it's going to be one of those things that everyone's going to have their COVID story. Now, I'm not a stranger to a crisis, having managed a business through the GFC and ended up being bought and sold during that process, and also having witnessed 9/11 on the ground in New York. I'm no stranger to a crisis, so I've had opportunities to learn a bit about myself and about leadership and communication and how to deal with dramas, if you like, through my personal and professional life. So I'd argue I was probably reasonably well equipped to handle COVID. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I think I just probably was. And it started to dawn on me in late January of 2020 that something terrible was going to descend upon us. And by mid-February, I'd actually written to all of my family and friends about what I thought might happen. Part of it was right, part of it was wrong, but I was convinced that we were heading into a really unusual, unknown and challenging set of circumstances. Thankfully for Australia, of course, it didn't end up being the medical emergency that it could have, but it was certainly a huge economic emergency. So our mantra at Porter-Davis was to plan for the worst and hope for the best. So we took decisions in February and March that really implied that we thought things were going to come to a grinding halt, and we didn't want to be exposed. Construction companies, whether they be commercial or residential, they operate on cash flow, they've got big commitments. You don't want to be left holding the baby, so to speak, when the cash stops. So we took a number of decisions to ensure that wasn't the case and got ourselves into a strong financial position quickly to then be able to think clearly about what was needed to be done. It was the third week of March. I sent everyone home, and they've only just started coming back this week, so in our Melbourne office in Docklands. So it's been quite a long journey in that regard. I've been amazed by how my people responded, the agility that they've shown, their ability to pivot and get the job done in a way that we never probably even contemplated before. Digital's played a critical role, which I can certainly talk more about, but we were on a business and digital transformation as COVID came along. And I think probably one of the main differences between companies that have done well and companies that have struggled has been their degree of digital maturity pre-COVID or as COVID descended has made a huge difference.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the digital side of things. And what kind of things did you implement around then? And are they going to be useful for going forward as well, the changes and learnings from through the turmoil? Yeah,
absolutely. I think what it did, Adam, it accelerated what we intended to do. So, in fact, there was an article, might have been in the Australian in February or March of last year. In fact, it was by Andrew Mole, who's the former MD of AMP and a principal board member of the Commonwealth Bank. And his proposition was that everyone in Australia that was running a business needed to stare good and hard at their strategy and wonder whether they had the right strategy or not for what was coming. And we did that, and my view was the only change we needed to make was just to double down on what we were doing, and digital was a critical part. So whether it's the virtual tours of the home, so the digital walkthroughs, you need to keep in mind that just like retail spaces, our display homes were closed. And for decades and decades, that's how residential building has sold houses to the Australian people, through display homes. And so all of a sudden they're closed, and the school of thought would have been, well, that will cause everything to come to a grinding halt. As it turned out, customers, of course, were at home on their laptops, on their iPads. We were putting out new digital virtual tours, and they were watching them in large volumes. And that was enabling them to get a really good understanding of what they might have wanted to build with us or with other businesses that were doing that. So that got accelerated dramatically. Our salespeople had to pivot and adjust, but they became experts at helping guide people through virtual tours. Would we have done that? Maybe eventually. Would we have done it within 30 or 60 days? No. Literally not a chance in hell. But, necessity is the mother of ingenuity, and we had to do something to make sure that we kept things ticking. And as it turned out, people had plenty of time to sit in their lounge rooms and dining rooms on their devices and to do the virtual tours with us. So really it meant, Adam, that other than March and April where things did pause for a moment or two, since then the sales rates and the number of new customers looking to build our homes has been quite strong.
Yeah, so what actually, because I remember everyone was prophesising this big Armageddon moment coming. I actually, in preparation for this, saw a Vimeo of you addressing employees. I don't know if it was meant to be a private link or not, but for some reason I got to see it.
Well done.
But it was really interesting moment, because there was so much uncertainty and you had such a calm demeanour about it. Why didn't things turn out so bad, and even to the point where it's booming today? I mean, I'm just in cognitive dissonance, I guess, about what actually happened there.
Yeah, look, it's a great thing to be thinking through. So it seems that when people, whether they be economists, politicians, business people, when they're trying to forecast the future, they're very much impacted and influenced by the now. So at that moment in March or April, things were pretty grim, And so what happens is I think people project that forward, and as a result, they come up with a relatively negative scenario. Now, don't get me wrong. As I said, we were planning for the worst and hoping for the best. I didn't want to get caught out. I thought it was going to be much worse than it actually was. And I think the one thing that I didn't fully appreciate was the degree to which federal governments around the world and central banks were going to put in so much liquidity into the market. I didn't anticipate that their response would be so dramatic and so swift. And that really just sort of sealed over the cracks, if you like, and just gave tremendous liquidity and momentum. And I think we are still actually riding that liquidity wave. So you've got all this money being pumped in by central banks around the world, including our own Reserve Bank, lots of stimulus from governments, including our own federal government, with home builder being the classic example of that for the construction industry. And now the cheapest money in a generation. I mean, you can get a 4-year fixed rate home loan at 1.99%. I mean, it's got a 1 in front of it. So that's just causing people to think, well, maybe now's the time to buy a new home, to build a new home, an apartment, whatever it might happen to be. But that cheap money is really causing quite a stimulus, I think.
Absolutely. And do you think this cheap money is it's a safe bet that it's going to stay with a 1 in front of it or even a 2 in front of it? Or is there an actual risk at some stage that inflation goes up and interest rates have to go up? So, with your finance background, it's a real privilege to be able to actually hear your opinion on this.
Well, I take my lead from the Governor of the Reserve Bank, and he's been very clear around, and he's said it a few times, including in their Reserve Bank board minutes, that he believes that it's here to stay for about 3 years, as in the cash rate is going to stay where it is. It's currently 0.1%. And it's going to stay there for about 3 years. So he has said it 3 or 4 times. It's extremely unusual that a Reserve Bank governor would give that level of guidance. Now, he might one day change his mind, but he's sending a very clear message that we can expect for around about the next 3 years that interest rates will be historically low. So it's one of those things where no one really knows, but based on the balance of the facts, you'd imagine that for at least the next couple of years, they'll stay very low.
Yeah. Fantastic. So digital walkthroughs is one of the pivots you did. Like every business, you had employees that work predominantly from home. What do you see as this for employees as, I guess, the potential moving forward? Do you think it's something that's been a real positive change in that sense?
Look, I think it's been really challenging for everyone in some respects. So we're a very social organisation. We enjoy each other's company. We enjoy being together at our Docklands offices, including in our Brisbane offices. We've got World of Style on City Road here in South Melbourne, South Bank. So we really enjoy each other's company, like a lot of businesses do. So the hard bit has been that social disconnection. And I often describe it, we lost our informal organisation, and the informal organisation plays a critical role in communication, understanding, sharing of thoughts and ideas, the so-called water cooler conversation that solves an issue. So that all disappeared overnight. So we were left with the formal organisation, which became the virtual formal organisation, so even more kind of structured, probably to the extent that none of us really had ever anticipated. So I think generally speaking, people got into a good rhythm working from home. They were very productive, there's no doubt. The data shows, and speaking to other people running businesses in different industries, pretty well everyone has said that their productivity levels were stronger during COVID than pre-COVID. Now we're going back to some sort of hybrid model. So we've had people return to the office in Docklands as of Monday this week, so last couple of days. It's been inconvenient to have to wear a mask. A lot of people don't like that. But overall, they're happy to be there in relatively modest numbers at this stage. But I think the work has probably been changed. It's a big statement. Maybe they've been changed forever because we were all in a certain habit. That habit got broken for long enough to probably create sustainable change. I think the so-called hybrid is the way we'll end up, where we're describing it at the moment as out of every 10 working days in a fortnight, we think people will be in the office for up to 5 of those 10 days. We think that's probably the sustainable position, but we'll find out. But at the same time, though, Adam, it's important to come together socially. So we'll come together for larger celebrations and reward and recognition events and those sorts of things. So that social element's still there, but I don't believe we'll return to the way we were.
Yeah, and of course, this for all employees, it might land at that 50% rate working from home. So How does this flow back around to consumers and how you see the consumers are buying Porter Davis houses?
Yeah.
How is this changing?
Yeah, look, I think a lot's happened to the consumer. They've all become far more familiar with their devices and how to use those devices to do something like to commit to buying or building a home. One of the things that we did during the pandemic is we launched a new brand called PDX for the first home buyer. It was a digitally enabled brand and digitally enabled experience where you can actually go through to depositing on your new home without talking to anyone if you don't want to. So it was quite a change. It was one of those things where people said, well, that'll never happen. But indeed it did. And we launched it right at the start of the pandemic, which is probably a bit courageous of us. But you've got to make your own luck, because then came Home Builder, which was aimed at that end of the market. So we've done really well for our customers out of that. So I think they're absolutely committed to a way of using digital like they weren't before, the consumers. They're comfortable or more comfortable to make decisions and buy online to a greater extent than they were previously. I think when it comes to the family home, if I can use that terminology, they want more flexibility. They want more living areas. They're more interested in multi-generational. I think it's clear that the concept of retirement home living for some families might be off the agenda now. And they might want to consider having their elderly parents or grandparents live with them for at least a period of time rather than going into a retirement home for reasons around the experiences that people had during the pandemic in retirement homes. So I think there's some change that's gone on there. We've just recently relaunched our brand hierarchy into the marketplace. And one of the things that we've done for COVID is we've introduced what we call a utility room, if you like. Our customers in a lot of our designs can choose to have an additional room built over their garage, and they can use it for whatever they want it to be. It might be another living space, it might be a home gym, it might be a home work area, a home study area. It can be whatever you want it to be. And one of the reasons we've done that is to respond to people's need for having a bit more flexibility in how they use their homes going forward, based on the fact that they've just spent a lot of time at home and aren't necessarily happy with everything that they've got.
What other kind of innovations are you seeing come through going forward over the next few years? Particularly interested in your thoughts around prefabrication. Do you think there's some kind of future in that, or what are the nuanced reasons for on-site building or prefabrication from your perspective? Yeah,
so we've given the digital bit a good go. So on prefab, we're absolutely committed to a prefabricated future. So all of our frames are now manufactured off-site and assembled on-site. That's a big change for us, and that's all happened in the last year or two. We're not alone in that regard. We know other builders have made a similar move, but some haven't, so it's a bit of a mixed bag in that regard. Prefabrication definitely has a bright future where the frames are an example. There's going to be other examples around wall systems and ceiling systems, and it'll be ongoing. I don't think there's going to be a big bang moment in Australian residential construction. I think it will continue to evolve and change. It'll get increasingly efficient, less wastage on site, more precision off site. But I don't envisage that there'll be a dramatic change in the way that we do things within a short period. I think it will continue to evolve. And then, of course, you've got the aspects, Adam, around sustainability and a green future. And I was looking at an invitation I received last night from Villawood, one of our development partners, and very successful land development firm here in Victoria. And Villawood, they've got a session on next week where they're taking people through some work they've done with South East Water, actually, around solar, around water, sustainable water efficient homes, around zero carbon homes, zero carbon communities. So they're an example of an organisation in our sector that's seeking to lead the way in that regard, and we're going to see more of that. Now, having said that, the consumer is still quite fixated by what they get in their home, and faced with the decision around, do I have the marble benchtop in my kitchen, or do I invest a bit more heavily in sustainable living? At the moment, that decision could go either way. There's no strong trend on that. A lot of people are still preferring to spend their money on their luxury appointments within their home than necessarily investing in a sustainable future, but that'll change over time.
Last year, I know the Green Building Council of Australia just started looking to get into residential, so they just released a new tool. And I know when they started in commercial, like buildings, like your offices and your big apartment buildings, once they got a foot in the market, like that actual branding had some value. So do you think that the Green Building Council having, Green Star homes, so above just the energy efficient homes, you got all the points that they put up, do you think that's got a bright future in residential construction, and maybe consumers might put a value on something like that?
Yeah, I think in due course. So I think it's like any change. Does the industry lead it? Do we wait for consumers to demand it? There'll be a balance in there somewhere. It definitely needs some further industry leadership, and as I said, Villawood's a good example of that. Yeah. And there are other businesses involved in that. And we're certainly making sure we're staying up to date and understanding the developments that are coming. There's no doubt we'll see everything from more sustainable homes, more automated homes. All those things are definitely coming. A lot of the technology is already there. It's just not widespread and widely used, but that will take time, but that will certainly come.
Fantastic. And looking forward, obviously with the shift to prefabrication and digital and all these things, and things are shifting around, what do you think for young professionals, how they can best prepare for the future, and what kind of skills do you think they should keep in mind to be adding to their toolkit? Yeah,
so certainly they need to, if they've got the opportunity, get a good relevant education, if that's possible. I know not everyone has that opportunity, but if they can get that opportunity in whatever shape or form it is, I'd strongly recommend that education is just a great foundation for really anyone in terms of what they're trying to do in their future life. I think also to stay very relevant, they need to be up to date with everything from what's happening on social media through to how digital's affecting the way things are happening across the globe. I mean, if you look at even things like payment services like Zip and Afterpay, who even knew about them a short time ago? Relatively new organisations that are changing the shape of how consumers pay for things. So there's always this constant opportunity. So I think education, stay relevant around understanding social media, understanding digital, and try to read broadly. Like, I think people tend to look at what's of interest to them, which I understand and I get, but it is not that hard to have a few different news services on your mobile device and have a general level of awareness about what's going on around you. Now, that might be related to COVID. We're all probably partly over that. But just have an awareness about what are the trends in Europe, what are the trends in the US, what's happening across North Asia. And it might be only just of things that are of interest to them, but just try to have an awareness outside of their own patch, their own friendship group. I think for young professionals or young trades, whatever they happen to be, they tend to be very focused on their own patch, their own circle of friends. They don't tend to necessarily be looking too far afield. They might do that from a music point of view or a social media point of view, but they're doing it from an information point of view. And I think that's something that they probably do well to do a bit more of.
Yeah, having diversity of ideas in your life, it's something that's
helpful.
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder as well. What kind of media do you consume, and how do you read books, or do you how do you do that?
Yeah, look, I mostly consume online, so I like short, sharp stuff, preferably non-fiction, fact-based stuff. So I'm a bit of a data junkie. I like to know something and know the facts or data behind it. So I have a range of news apps on my phone and on my iPad that flash at me when there's something interesting. I might look at it, I might not. So I do like short, sharp injections of information. I like to be aware about what's happening globally. I like to watch some of the so-called cable networks and some of the shows around history, especially history on how nations were formed and wars and stuff like that. There's an enormous amount to be learnt from the sort of dramatic history. So I'm a bit of a film buff when it comes to anything that involves an invasion or destruction of the earth. So I kind of like the big picture. You might be getting that impression, Adam.
Absolutely.
So murder mystery, count me out, but give me a comet or something like that, and I'm into it.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much, Adrian. If people want to find out more about yourself and Porter Davis, where should they go, or is there anything interesting that you'd like to point people to?
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, we've got a pretty good website these days for Porter Davis. So to go onto the Porter Davis website, have a look at the beautiful homes that we have there. I'd encourage them to do that. In our mantra, it's design, style and quality. And we really do believe we bring beautiful designs to particularly the people of Victoria and Queensland. So have a look at our new digital tools, check them out. The idea was for people to be able to create their home digitally before they committed to building with us, so there was no surprises and they had a very clear understanding of exactly what their home would look like. We've made great strides towards that, still a bit more to do, but we're incredibly closer to that than we were just a year or two ago. So that's really been our main drive, to show people virtually what they will build before they actually build it.
Interesting. And then just to drill down on that a bit, so then they can customize it as they want online. Is that the future? And then
Correct.
And they can get certainty in price in real time, or I'm just throwing that out there. Is something like that where it's going, do you think?
That's correct, yeah. So we're absolutely committed to this notion of price in real time, but also, and we've done a lot of work on colour packs and inclusions and options. So it can be, our research tells us, the Housing Industry Association would say it, everyone in the industry would say it, for people to make the decision to build a home, it can be quite a daunting task. It's got a lot of wonderful positives because it's yours the way you wanted it and you're the first people to use it, which is highly appealing, but it can be quite daunting. There's a lot of decisions to make. So what we've found is, while some people are comfortable with making those decisions and they might visit our showroom of World of Style on City Road in South Bank, other people will say, you know what, you guys are the experts. Can you just show me what I could do? And I might just choose what you've recommended. So online, we now have given people the opportunity. They can choose their colour schemes, their options, their packs, their inclusions, and have a very clear understanding about what their home will look like. And then we've got like 100 designs and multiple choices, so you can get to a relatively customised outcome by simply choosing the options that we're putting forward. So it's good to play with, if nothing else.
Absolutely. The first thing I'm going to do straight after this conversation.
Have a look.
Exciting. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Adrian. It's been a real pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. If you're looking to learn more about timber and upskill yourself, I recommend going to the Wood Solutions website. And of course, always be on the lookout for our Tuesday webinars in 2021. They're happening every couple of weeks. So you can register